Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-Bit Podsmash,
where gaming goes to grab a beer. We are your hosts, Penguin and
Termite.
And
You're Termite, I'm Penguin.
We are a weekly podcast about video games and culture and smashing the ideas together, hence the name Podsmash.
Yep.
We love to talk about the things we love, which are those things.
Yes, it's where games and culture intersect.
Yes.
And we are drinking Strange Ways Albino Monkey, I believe?
It is.
Yes.
A white ale brewed with spices.
The monk is one color, and then the E is another, so it's like a monk-E.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like a monkey
Nice.
in a robe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Strange Ways is a local brewery to our area. They have two locations, one in Richmond and one in Fredericksburg. And I like them a lot. Like, they're starting to grow on me. And
they're awesome.
They had this on sale at a local Food Lion, so I made sure to grab it when I did.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
They're starting to distribute more in our area since they opened up their Fredericksburg location.
Mm-hmm. It's very good, though. It's very light. It's good this time of year. Spring.
Yeah. Springtime.
Springtime ale.
Light.
So, I very much like it.
They say a white ale, tradition of timeless Belgian wheat beers. So it has the
Wheat.
like spicy kind of tanginess of a Belgian beer.
For
I
sure.
like it.
It's good. It is good. So
How you doing? I have a marathon this week.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, on Sunday.
Stretching? You doing all your...
Every day. Stretching. I'm eating a little bit more now, which is nice because I'm not going to be in weight loss mode when I hit the start line.
Ah, yes.
I got to be even keel.
Carb loading.
So slowly, like the idea of like having this one massive carbo load meal is bad because you wake up the next day and you're bloated and you're full and like you have a morning routine you have to adhere to.
It's like that episode of The Office where he eats a bunch of
Alfredo.
Alfredo.
Right before running a 5K. Yeah. So I have the idea or the mentality of carbo loading slowly throughout the week. So it's like not tracking calories, eating when you're hungry, but making sure you're eating healthy choices. So not going off the rails of a diet, so to speak, but definitely if I were to continue eating the way that I am this week, I would be gaining weight very slowly over time. So
yeah,
I can't maintain what I'm eating now. I have to go back to being strict again after the race.
Boo. Boo. So are you nervous?
I am.
Yeah,
But it's cool because the more nervous, the more jittery you are, the more you care.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if it didn't matter, or if it was just whatever, I'm going to go run this thing and who cares, then you wouldn't be nervous or worried about it. So, yeah, I was looking at the course map today. I was looking at the Facebook groups, the Strava groups, trying to get the mentality of everyone else, trying to stake out the field, the area, the air, so to speak, of the race, how it's going to be. Check out the weather. It's going to be perfect. So I'm excited and I'm nervous, and it should be fun.
I would always get nervous before a play as well, and that's a good thing. Like, if I ever teach theater to anyone or teach acting, like, I'm gonna tell them, like, nerves are good.
Yeah.
Like, don't let the nerves, like, influence your performance, in your case, your run, but at the same time, like you said, if you're nervous, it means you care. If you're nervous, it means you're gonna be alert. And if you're nervous, it means you're gonna be paying attention to the details and not just, your mind is gonna be 100% engaged and not just on autopilot. So,
right, you're gonna be in it.
Yeah, you'll be in it. In it to win it.
I mean, I've been training for this thing since January.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work to go into one thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people hate marathons for that reason. Because a lot can happen in the 3 hours plus that it'll take to run this thing. Yeah. So we'll see. How you doing?
I'm a mess, man. I've got a sunburn on my back. I decided to try to get some sun and mow the lawn with my shirt off, but my wife wasn't home, and I don't have great flexibility, which just means that there's a big old patch on my back where I couldn't put sunscreen, and it's a bright red. So sleeping has been interesting.
That's the worst. And then it wakes you up.
Yeah, and then I also got a blister. I always get blisters, especially the first mow of the season. Like, I'm wearing my crappy flip-flops, and I've got blisters right where the...
mowing your grass in flip-flops is your first mistake.
Don't say that. I'm not going to fray my feet, okay? He says, and then, 4 months later, so I frayed my feet mowing the lawn this week. That's been miserable. No. Anyways, so I had these blisters, and I was in the car with my wife after mowing the lawn, and I was listening to whatever she was talking about, so I wasn't really paying attention to what I was physically doing, like fidgeting, and I peeled the skin off of my blister. So on one side, on my right foot, I've got a blister that's healed nicely because I left the skin on it, and on the left side, I've got a blister that is just like agony. Every single step is a reminder of how stupid I was because it's just not in a good spot. Yeah. Like it wasn't until after I had done it that I realized what I did. Like I yanked the skin off and then I was like, ah! oh, what did I just do?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not my finest. It was not Penguin's finest moment.
Oh, that's horrible.
I was about to say finest penguin moment. Finest penguin moment. But let's stop talking about our not finest things and talk about our favorite things.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Doing this podcast is our favorite thing. So what's your favorite thing, Penguin?
Oh, I went this weekend. I feel like this is a really good year for movies, and maybe it's only because I have Movie Pass.
Yeah, probably.
And now I'm seeing more movies, like allowing myself to go see movies that I wouldn't normally see, but I'm glad I'm seeing them because I saw The Quiet Place.
Oh, yeah.
This weekend, and it was great.
That's what I've heard. I've heard lots of good things about this movie.
I, as most American males, am incredibly emotionally stunted, and so I have a hard time, like, crying, like, even like a good cry when it's appropriate. Dude, brought me to tears.
Did it really?
I had tears streaming down my face. I was like, oh my gosh, it was so emotional. Like, not because of the fear. Like, well, I mean, it was also, like, suspenseful, so there were, like, some pretty intense moments.
Yeah.
But, like, there was this, like, it was still a really emotional story. And that's what I like about it. Like, it wasn't just a horror movie. It wasn't just, like, let's scare people. Like, it had a really emotional, like, heartfelt story as well.
Wow.
And so, like, I recommend it. It was very good. It was also just, it's unlike any, you go into a movie, you don't realize how much of a movie's, like, sound you rely on.
Yeah.
I think the same is true for video games. Like, you rely so much on, like, how much sound they're bombarding you with, that when you go to see a movie that most of it is, like, completely silent, and that's the, conceit of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, it was different. It was very different.
Yeah, I heard it, like, draws the audience in. You almost don't want to chew your popcorn.
Yeah.
It's so tense.
Yeah, and when sound does happen, it's always jarring, even if it's not, like, a particularly loud sound. You're just like, oh my gosh, So it's good.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
is it normal for a modern American man to not cry at things?
I think it's maybe I'm just emotionally stunted. I don't know.
I don't cry at any movies. Is never, because every single time I get anywhere near emotional, I'm like, this is just a story. It's not real.
I think we teach each other that it's like seen as weak to cry, and so it's like there are times that I want to cry. I'm like, I should be crying right now, and I don't. Yeah, and it's probably a bad thing. So I should probably see a therapist, but maybe I don't want to see a therapist.
Like the intro to Up. The Disney Pixar's Up, extremely sad, and like I remember seeing it in theaters, and people were weeping, and I'm like, it's a cartoon, it's not real. I'm not.
No, I mean that's the thing is, I can still feel that emotion, but it doesn't always express itself in tears for me. Yeah, so like I can still like I thought the first 5 minutes of Up were amazing, and were incredible, like incredible storytelling, and incredibly emotional storytelling. I'm with you; it didn't make me cry, but this, like, it just hit all the buttons, and I was like,
the things that hit me the most, ironically, or maybe not ironically, are bromance relationships and the emotional like tension that can happen with those stories, whether they're not friends anymore, or there was something that drove between them, or it's a really intense bond that they are like in a positive way. Like bromance is always like more than anything else.
You're gonna make me cry.
No. Yeah, like Harry and Ron, seeing them on the screen and reading them in the 7th book. It was like that whole camping scene where like Ron left in angriness and like all of that. That was one example of like me being emotional. Yeah.
Cool.
And then Fast and the Furious, when all the bros are together and we're family. You know what I mean? We're family. Because that's what that movie's about. The movie's about family. I don't know what you're doing.
It's Vin Diesel.
Oh.
So you can barely understand anything he says, so he's like mumbling it.
Just muscles in his way? Is that what it is?
It's all the muscles.
Just close his mouth. And
first muscles. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So what's your favorite thing?
I thought about my favorite thing all day, and I had it in my head, and now it's gone.
Oh my god! I
have no idea what it was. I'm thinking right now. What's my favorite thing? Very, very, very cheap video games.
Okay.
And it's relevant this week because the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, the last generation, are in this weird, like, liquidized state where every store and eBay and everyone in the area on every public market outlook, like there's Facebook Marketplace, there's OfferUp, Craigslist, everyone is just trying to get rid of all of their PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 stuff at the same time.
Wow.
So it's dirt cheap.
Nice.
So I've picked up like 10 PlayStation games and I've spent like $20 maybe.
Wow.
No, it's more than that. I've got like a lot. I don't know, I just counted them, like 27 games, but I've had some in the past. So I don't know how many I bought. but they're like $2 to $3 each.
Nice.
And it's amazing. So I'm finally amassing my PlayStation 3 collection of exclusives and really good third-party titles. So right now, the sale of buy 4 for $10 is my favorite thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's pretty sweet.
That's favorite things.
Favorite things.
Yay! Our next segment is...
Bow, 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 bow.
You're ahead of yourself, because we're going to do an update on what are you playing.
We do that...
What are you playing?
In the the Evernote list.
You did it wrong.
I have currently playing after DLC.
Yeah, you did it wrong.
So that's why I did Wrath Horns for DLC first.
That's fine. But we're going to do what are you playing?
What are you playing?
What are you playing?
I am still very, very close to being done with the Uncharted 3 Platinum.
Nice.
I've finished the story on the hardest difficulty. I've collected every collectible there is in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's just cleanup.
Cool.
And I'll have the Platinum done. And then I will move on to Uncharted 4 to do the cleanup of that game as well, because that story is done and all the collectibles are done.
Fantastic.
So I'm very much living in the Uncharted world.
Great. This is kind of cheating because I'm not actually playing this at this moment, but I'm really excited because God of War comes out this weekend, and I am in hype mode. Like, by next week's or the next podcast we record, I'll give you all of my initial thoughts on it. But with all the 10 out of 10s, I mean, this is being as favorably reviewed at this stage in its release as Breath of the Wild was, when it was back, a year ago.
Yeah.
It was getting 10 out of 10s and all the hype was real. God of War 4 is doing that as well, so I am very excited about it.
It's hands down the highest rated PlayStation 4 game yet.
Wow, like of all time?
Of the PlayStation 4
PlayStation
exclusives.
4,
yeah.
Wow.
I don't know where it stacks up against like third-party stuff because I haven't done that research yet, but yeah, as far as exclusives are concerned, like Horizon Zero Dawn, all the Uncharted stuff, PlayStation exclusives, it's by far the best one.
Yeah, well, I will probably be talking about Breath of the Wild, or I have been talking about Breath of the Wild for a long time.
For a year.
I probably will be talking about God of War.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'll have to have what my own thoughts are on it. So
sweet. Termite will get to it in 1 year.
You'll get to it sooner than that.
Well, I'm backlogged still.
Yeah, but you'll get to it sooner than that.
I hope so.
Like I'll let you borrow it, and then you will
make it a priority.
Make it a priority so you can, give it back and also experience it.
Yeah.
In the same way that you would drop whatever you were playing to play Breath of the Wild, too. Yeah.
In this weird sense, I borrowed Horizon Zero Dawn from a friend of ours.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy it as much because I was in a hurry and I was also focused on trophies. And both of those combined was like, I need to get this game back to my friend because it's not mine. I didn't have this ownership of it, which we'll talk about later about having ownership of things when you have your own games. It's different. So I didn't take my time with Horizon and I blasted through it. I still don't actually own a copy of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it eventually and there's a new game plus. I'd love to play through it again.
Yeah, I wish I had a physical copy of it because now I have a digital copy of it.
Yeah.
So because I just wanted to buy it and play it. And though I got to take my time with it, I still kind of wish I had a physical copy to hang on the shelf.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, let's go ahead and move into... Now you can do our segment. DLC.
Downloadable content.
Downloadable content is a little game, a little mini discussion, a bit that we like to have in 80-bit Podsmash before our main topic. And today's bit is gonna be... We're talking about gaming history in the podcast today, so I want to talk about history gaming.
Ooh.
Kind of. And I will say, if you could pick any figure from history, a historical figure, and make a video game out of their life, obviously embellished version of their life. You know, we're not talking about historical accuracy here. We're talking about a far-fetched, fun embellished video game taking sort of the, major beats or inspiration of a character, of a person from history's life. What would that person be and what kind of game? What would the shape of the game look like?
Can I have two?
Sure.
All right, the first one is Lewis and Clark. A fully open world exploration game
of the American
exploring America,
Midwest
right?
and
of the Midwest.
Far West. Yeah,
and
that's
just
awesome.
Totally exploration where it's like survival. So it's not centered on combat, but you have combat to survive, but that's not the focus of the game.
Right. So it's kind of like the forest.
Yeah, you got to
early
scrounge.
access game.
Fighting is not ideal because you don't want to spend the very limited amount of
resources,
stuff you have. So it'd be crafting and hunting and survival with a really good story between the two.
Have you ever played The Forest? It was an early access game. I've never played it myself, but I saw people playing it, and that's almost exactly what it is. You're dropped in a forest and you have to survive, but you're being there are these kind of rogue elements, but that's not the focus. The main, like, you've got plenty of other things that will kill you, like starvation, dehydration, exposure. So you have to do all these things to like keep yourself alive and then also not die to the natives.
What is that for?
It was a Steam early access game. So I think it's still early access, but it's supposedly supposed to be really good.
Interesting.
So
should come to PlayStation so I can get trophies.
Ah,
hey. And my other one, my second one,
mm-hmm.
is there's no single person involved, but it would be really cool to do like a senuous sacrifice, like mentality type of game with the Trail of Tears, and like bring the whole like the sadness of that, like bring it to the mainstream America, like Indians, Native Americans being driven out of their home by the white
and just
people
a
coming
lead
over.
Native American protagonist, whether it's female or male, would still be really interesting.
Right.
Yeah,
wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be great because you don't see many games.
And I would love to know the history. Like, it's an easy way to get the history if it's historically accurate, which you said it should be. So, and
no, it doesn't have to be
accurate.
It doesn't have to be historically accurate. Yeah, because my option or my person is one of my favorite and arguably my favorite person from history is the playwright Christopher Marlowe. Surprise! You thought I was going to say Shakespeare. But Christopher Marlowe...
I had no idea what you were going to say. I had no clue.
Christopher Marlowe was a Elizabethan playwright during the English Renaissance. He actually died 6 months before Shakespeare started writing. That's important because I'll get to that later. But Christopher Marlowe was... he was one of Shakespeare's contemporaries. So he wrote... I'm sure you're familiar with the play Dr. Faustus.
Nope.
Okay, he wrote Dr. Faustus. He wrote several other plays. He didn't actually write that many. He didn't write nearly as many as Shakespeare. He also wasn't like a common person like Shakespeare. He was nobility, so he was a little bit more well known. But what's interesting about Christopher Marlowe's life is he was a spy for the crown. So he was both a playwright and a spy. So he had this very interesting life, and he died. It's heavily, I think he was murdered, and he was murdered like about 6 months before Shakespeare started writing.
Interesting.
He is one of the top contenders for when people say like, oh, who is really Shakespeare? Now, granted, I don't believe in any of them. They're about as wacky and crazy conspiracy theories as anything out there. I think they're as ridiculous as like who shot JFK, like those theories.
Yeah.
So I would describe myself as a Stratfordian, which is the theory that says the man from Stratford upon Avon, William Shakespeare, was William Shakespeare. He wrote William Shakespeare's plays. There is one theory, however, that I love, not because I think it's compelling, but because I think it's really interesting and it would be hilarious if it were true. And the theory is that Christopher Marlowe faked his death and then wrote as William Shakespeare. And actually wrote William Shakespeare's plays. So
William Shakespeare never existed.
So, well, he might have existed, but he was just a patsy, and Christopher Marlowe was like a front man, a proxy. Yes, there you go. And the real person writing the plays was Christopher Marlowe, who had faked his death but still wanted to write plays. So he wrote under the pen name William Shakespeare.
So that's what your video game's about?
Yes, essentially. Well, kind of. So my video game would be kind of like an Assassin's Creed style, like spy thriller, except set in English Renaissance. Christopher Marlowe would be the main character, but I imagine you'd have these things. So you'd have all these like things where you're trying to like espionage, get like spy information during these plays, though, and you're and possibly like there would be an element of like you would actually get up on stage and perform, but like when you're performing, you would actually enter that world. So doing Dr. Faustus,
that's cool.
And you would play the actor essentially playing Faustus, casting spells, summoning demons, and like doing all these interesting things. So like the gameplay would completely change. Or like you might do Tamerlane where you're fighting and you're what were they? They were Huns or
I don't know.
They were
it's your world, homie.
Tamerlane's a Mongol, so you'd be like
I'm
Mongol.
I'm just digging the idea of like the main story is happening on stage, but you're playing it in like a fully realized version of the imagination of what's happening in the play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be
and it's very
awesome.
much like Assassin's Creed, where the main body is like in a machine, kind of like the Matrix, or but his mind is being tapped like for the history of his DNA or whatever.
So that would be my awesome play. So you might assassinate some people, or you might gather information, but you'd be doing so like half the game you'd be playing, you'd be some kind of spy, Marlowe sneaking around and doing stuff. But then the other half of the gameplay would be then you would be the people capturing the imagination of the people that you're espionaging from in these plays. So it'd be like a theatrical Assassin's Creed spy thriller game. It would be awesome. Yeah, it would. So that's my game.
All right.
So Christopher Marlowe.
That's DLC.
Our bit. So why don't you explain to us or to our listeners what our topic is today? What question brought us to talk about gaming history and the innovations that have come about as a result of it.
So, as you guys may know, I am an avid video game collector and archiver of video game material and literature and boxes and books and games. So I have always kept my Game Informer magazine subscriptions, which come with GameStop memberships, but that's an aside. And I noticed when the 300th issue had come out, Game Informer was celebrating, hey, we have 300 issues. So I looked on my shelf, and it was like, I have 200, and I looked through all of them and noticed that I was only missing 4.
Wow.
So I went to the world of Reddit, to the GameStop subreddit, where a lot of GameStop employees are, and because GameStop provides these magazines, I figured that would be a good place to start, and just posted like, hey, would anybody be willing to send me these 4 issues that I could have the entirety of 200 to 300 issues like as a collection? And I had like 5 responses, all willing to do it. It was amazing. So shout out to 2 Redditors.
Shout out.
Their names on Reddit are Silent Sword 3, and I don't know how to pronounce this, so I apologize, but Briway?
All right.
Briway? I'm sorry.
How's it spelled?
BRI-WEI.
All right. I'm going to say Briway.
Briway.
Yeah.
I would think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they sent me the magazines, and I now have the full set from 200 to 300. Now, in all of that, as it was happening, I was blown away by the positivity and the responses, not just being lambasted for, oh, you're stupid for trying to collect these things. They don't matter. We have the internet. Why would you collect these things? Why is Game Informer even relevant? Like, I expected the worst because that's how the internet is. Like, you post anything, you just get lambasted. So I was very, very happy and pleasantly surprised at the positivity that came out. And kudos to them for being, like, examples of positivity that we need on the internet.
Yeah.
And interact.
Great. Thanks, guys.
So you guys rock. With that, I started taking old issues of these magazines with me to work. When I'm in internet-restricted places, I would have some downtime waiting on other things. And so I'd pull out these old magazines. And I'd start flipping through them. Now, I lived through... Issue 200 was published in January of 2010. So, like, I was definitely an adult. I was married.
Yeah.
And issue 300 is in March 2018. So, it was an 8-year stretch, 8 years and 3 months between the 100 issues. And it's filling in the gaps of my memory. So, we're calling the topic Comparing the Gaps.
Okay.
So, in 2010, we were very much in the middle of the PS3, Xbox 360 era. And there was a lot of stuff happening with developers and publishers, and Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo were all doing their things. And today, same kind of thing is happening. Like, they're all doing their thing, and there's lots of games coming out from developers and publishers. But it's different enough to make comparisons, but it's not different enough to also want to explore those comparisons.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the kind of foundation and structure that we have our discussion tonight.
Right, yeah. If you could sum it up in one kind of simple question, it would just be, what can we learn from our gaming past?
Yeah.
So we're kind of taking a broad, big picture look. Usually when we talk about our, gaming history, we're talking about a very specific thing in gaming history. Today we're kind of looking at the big, broad strokes and talking about what innovations we think have really shaped our current gaming climate. But it all kind of started because Termite was really looking at this very specific 8-year time frame.
Yep.
And
I do have a blog post talking about a 10-year difference between March 2010 and March 2018. So hit up 80bitpodsmash.com and you can see that blog post there. And I have some basic stuff that I'm actually going to be using and drawing from in this episode too. So if you want more, go check out that blog post at our website.
He lays it out really well.
Game Informer is relevant because it's hard as a magazine publication to be relevant in the world of the internet. It's just, period. That's hard. So what Game Informer has done, working with GameStop, is stake a claim to have exclusive stories or exclusive access to certain games. So, for example, issue 301 is Spider-Man. No one could talk or report about the new PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game coming out in September until Game Informer published their magazine first. Then everyone else had access. And so in doing so, they have exclusive scoops, stories, inside access to stuff no one else does, and it makes you want to buy their magazine because you cannot get that on the internet anywhere else. Because they're not talking to anyone but Game Informer. So unless Game Informer has a leak, and then that would be bad for their business, so why would that happen?
Right.
So that's how they're relevant today. And back in the day, I have some Game Pros and Nintendo Powers and other magazines too, where there was no internet, so everything was magazines. But anyway, I just want to highlight that's how Game Informer is still relevant. That's why I care about them, because they're awesome.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, then let's kind of jump right in and just sort of lay out some context. So we're going to be using the terms retro and modern a lot this episode. So modern games is pretty easy to define.
The current generation.
The current generation of video games, and mostly the last generation as well. So it's the PS. We're talking about kind of PS3 era through PlayStation 4, Xbox 360 through Xbox One, and
Wii U and Switch.
Wii, maybe even as far back as Wii, because Wii came out around the same. I mean, the Wii was in that same.
The Wii was 2006.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
And the Wii U was 2012.
Mm-hmm. I think the Nintendo's consoles are so off center from the rest of them that I would say that you wouldn't really call Wii games retro, would you?
Well, we already have
this
sidebar.
This, yes.
My definition of retro is PS3 and Xbox 360 and Wii U and back. Pretty much not the current generation. And back is retro.
I disagree, but that's fine. Part of the reason why I disagree, and I think that I didn't really capture this very well, and I didn't think about it until later, and so I didn't really verbalize it until later. But I think that to me, retro really is captured by the last greatest innovation.
Yeah, and I like that definition a lot.
To gaming, yeah. So that's part of the reason why I was interested in this topic, because I did really want to talk about those innovations and what kind of changed everything. So, yes, our definition of a retro is a little bit more flexible.
What I like about your definition is it's almost like we're going to draw a line in the sand, and everything is now different forever.
Yeah,
and that's to that line and behind is retro.
Yeah,
and so that's
because. Quite frankly, I was telling this to a coworker today, quite frankly, there is a huge difference in the look and even the feel of a game like Mario 64 versus Mario Odyssey. Yeah. At the end of the day, there's nothing majorly technologically different between those two games. They still play basically the same way. Mm-hmm. And one's a little bigger and prettier.
Right.
And has some interesting mechanics that the other game doesn't have. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's not as big of a jump even as Mario 64 compared to Super Mario 3 or something like that.
Right.
The games play completely different. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're going to be discussing. But yeah, so really quick though, let's kind of talk about what reasons you would even have to play retro games. Why is it even important to talk about retro games? Why do people like you and I care about retro games?
Me personally, there's a couple of things. I love the context for new games. Mm-hmm. It creates a context for it.
Yeah, that comparison I just made is made in context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I grew up with everything.
Mm-hmm.
I had video games out the wazoo, if that's a phrase we can use today. I don't even know.
It is. It's fine.
I've grown up with Mario. You can go back to episode 0 and hear my gaming history. My first Mario was Mario 3.
Mm-hmm.
I play Mario Odyssey today. I have every reference. I get every reference Mario Odyssey makes to all of its retro stuff. Mm-hmm. Just a giant context. I know what Nintendo's been through. I know its hardships. I know Mario inside and out. He was called Jumpman and Donkey Kong, all the way up to Mario Odyssey, right? Mm-hmm. So I've created this I didn't create it. I have a context from the history of games. And so going back to play them now, my current example of this is I was a Xbox 360 gamer in the last generation. So I largely missed out on all of the PlayStation 3 exclusives.
Yeah.
So the studios that are making my favorite games today, like Insomniac making Ratchet and Clank is one example. Insomniac made Resistance Fall of Man 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. Guerrilla Games, who just made Horizon Zero Dawn, made Killzone 2 and 3. Mm. I never played those games.
Yeah.
I want to go back and see what Guerrilla Games came from. What are their roots? What are the roots of Horizon Zero Dawn? It gives you a context for that development team.
Right. Even if it's a contrast, even if it's so starkly different from what they're doing now, it definitely, you can say, oh, okay,
I just learned recently that Treyarch, the maker of the early Modern Warfare Call of Duty games, that my favorite ones were Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3, Treyarch made those games, as opposed to a different company that made the Black Ops stuff. But they made Spider-Man 2 for the original Xbox, sitting on the shelf. I had no clue.
That's a good game, too.
It's amazing game. Yeah. And so I had a fondness for Treyarch already with the early Call of Duties, and now I can go back to the original Xbox and play Spider-Man 2 and draw connections and get a context for, whoa, this is an open world action game, Spider-Man. Yeah. And they made first-person shooters that are really good, too. Guerrilla Games made first-person shooters, and now they made Horizon Zero Dawn. It's crazy. So you can compare and contrast and establish context of modern games, and it allows you to get more excited. Insomniac's making the new Spider-Man game for PS4. Mm-hmm. I'm over the moon excited. I can't wait. I'm more excited about Spider-Man than I am God of War.
Wow. Yeah.
And then Santa Monica Studios, they made the Order 1886, but they also are making God of War.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's cinematic context, and that's in the same generation. Yeah. So you can do that. Yeah, that's why I love retro games.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think that the other obvious things are that, fun memories for those of us who grew up playing retro games. I mean, everyone likes going back and playing the games from their youth. Everyone likes going back and watching the movies from their youth. Like, it's just something we do.
Yep.
So I think
we could do a whole topic on nostalgia all by itself.
I think we have, or at least we've talked about it at great length. So I think nostalgia. We don't want to downplay that. I mean, they're also just fun. Like, they're good games most of the time. So I think that there are some
especially
objective,
the timeless ones.
Yeah, I think there's some objective fun to any game. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to find or like get into, but I think any game has the potential to be fun to any person.
Yep.
So just kind of like what jives with you. So there's also the sort of competitive aspect of like, I know I have gone back to titles because people have said like, I bet you couldn't beat it faster than me. You know what I mean? You know, so there's speed running notwithstanding, like even just the sort of like, oh, like you played that, I want to go play it better. You know, so
I can beat you in Mario Kart Double Dash.
Yeah, exactly.
I was so good at it.
Oh yeah. I don't think you can.
Right.
Termite, I'm gonna get you.
Right.
Yeah, cool, sweet.
And then the experience, the artistic expression that's timeless. So a development team, an artist, a maker, storyteller, their artistic expression in and of itself is timeless. And so being able to go back and get those stories and those experiences and experience them today. Again, I'm going back and planning my PlayStation 3 tour of all those exclusives and all those stories that I've never played before. They're going to be new to me again. So that expression is going to be awesome. And I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking about retro games, let's talk about those innovations that we think, you know, kind of not only drove those retro titles and I'll use the word semi-retro titles, but what were those, you know, what were those big steps in gaming history that kind of changed everything? And so that's what we're going to, again, just to sort of lay a framework. When we say an innovation, we mean something big, some technology, some new or you know, way the technology is incorporated into the games that has kind of changed everything. So changed how we consume the games, like how they play, changed how we pay for them. We talked in a couple episodes ago, we talked about the price and how games are priced.
Yep.
And we talked about
the digital movement, how that affects distribution and marketing and price.
And we talked about how we think that like a lot of those big price hikes came during huge innovations, like were something new.
When the cost of making a game makes a jump.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
does the price.
Yeah. And then, of course, even just like how our culture perceives gaming and what kind of artistic expressions are possible. That's what we mean by something that's like a true innovation to the form of gaming. That it's something that all of the developers will adopt. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we mean by, you know, so even though people are still making 2D platformers, like the majority of mainstream gaming has made a jump to something else. So what are those big leaps? Let's talk about them.
We can start, and you want to go chronologically?
Let's go chronologically backwards.
Okay, so the most recent one, which would be the current generation, is actually the last two, and this is why we disagree on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, the last generation being retro or not, is they're kind of lumped together in this one biggest thing, and that's the internet-connected home console.
Yep.
And it started with the PlayStation 2, and they had this little network adapter. Sorry, the Dreamcast actually had a dial-up modem, 56K modem, phone cord slot built into its hardware. The PlayStation 2 had the network adapter, which allowed you to connect it to the internet. Yeah. And then the Xbox kind of spearheaded the whole thing with having a broadband RJ45 port built right into the console. And then later had the wireless adapter for Wi-Fi. Nintendo had a modem for the GameCube, but it like was very like Phantasy Star Online was it.
I think it was just bad.
Like, it just and also was the Dreamcast, and so was PS2s. They were all bad except for Xbox. But having a console connected to the internet changed everything forever.
Oh yeah, I mean, in my notes I said the two biggest things that it changed was multiplayer. Multiplayer was forever changed.
Multiplayer was locked away to PC. Like I experienced online multiplayer for the first time with StarCraft 1.
Yep.
And it was amazing. I was completely addicted. I was talking to people in chat rooms. I was talking to people during the game.
But PC gamers still often they've had it for years, and so it's not like it was something new, but it was, you know, PC gamers are and will always kind of be a bit of on the fringe. Not so much these days, as we talked about in our PC versus console episode, but like especially in the early days, like most people made the jump to home consoles, and so having their home console be essentially it was Halo. I mean, like Halo really drove it. Halo 2, being able to play Halo with your friends, or no, sorry, not with your friends, with random strangers online and getting to prove who's the best, like drew people in droves, and inevitably it led to the emergence of esports. Like I don't think we would have esports the same way we might have with PC games alone, but I mean just making multiplayer available to every gamer, not just the PC gamers, is what kind of drove the esports movement. And that's what esports are huge now. Esports are gargantuan, a worldwide phenomenon. So that's I think, that was, I think, the last big leap we had.
And there's also the idea of patching a game. There was never a thing. You printed your game on a disc on PlayStation 1 or Dreamcast, or not, sorry, that was it. That was all it was. Just there you go. This is the game. Day one, you buy it. That's all you get. And if, like, Nintendo had these weird things where you could, like, send in a memory card and they would, like, give you a save file with the update and send it back, and it was really stupid and clunky. But, like, having an internet-connected console allows day one patches, which introduced buggy game releases that can be fixed later, or content-shorted games that are, like, shallow and weak and quick.
Because they can
And they
DLC.
can just patch in. And then the advent of DLC, which led to the current microtransaction problem we're having. Like, all that stuff is rooted in the fact that these consoles are online.
Or hooked up, Yeah,
they're hooked up online, and they can be changed at a whim. And even this happened this week, hot off the press, there apparently are music licenses expiring in Grand Theft Auto 4 that they have to go back and patch out of the game now.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
They're going back and changing an old game from 2008.
Because the licenses, I
think 2008? I don't remember when it came out, but and they have to change the game. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah,
that's like going back to a movie, like, and ripping scenes out because a license expired, right? Or like going back to a novel and saying, there's a recall in these novels. We need to recall all of them and reprint them all. Like, really?
Yeah. I mean, the copyright law is different for all of those mediums, but I get what you mean. Yeah. No,
so
I do.
None of that would be okay or possible without an internet-connected console. Huge innovation in digital purchases.
Well, and even just the idea of, like, having to play a single player game while connected on, like, you have to log in.
Yeah, that was like
online.
The Xbox One shooting themselves in the foot from their announcement.
Diablo, even on PC, Diablo 3 did that when it first. I mean, it still is. It's not just a single player game, but you can still get as much enjoyment out of it single player, but you have to be connected online. Yeah, exactly. So with all these things, there are downsides, and there are things that we lost too. Like, we lost couch co-op. We lost that sort of sense of, local couch co-op that you have with your friends. Like, you have to go, like,
it's coming back.
It is, but, like, it's still not nearly...
You have to be intentional about it.
You used to have to do it. That was the only way you could play multiplayer. That's the only way you could say, I'm better than you at Halo.
Yeah, a good example is Conker's Bad Fur Day for Nintendo 64. It's made by Rareware. It's a total, like, third-person, open-world exploration collectathon game. Yeah. Has a 4-player split-screen multiplayer. Why? Yeah. It's good. We had it a lot, but, it had to be baked in.
Right, yeah. Cool. So what was the jump that came before internet connected consoles? Remember, we're reverse chronological order. So what was the innovation that came before that?
The jump to 3D, which would be N64, PlayStation 1, and Sega Saturn.
So we're not talking about 3D like you put 3D glasses on in the movie theater and the screen pops out at you. No. We're talking about 3D environments within a video game world.
Like Mario 64.
Yeah, a dynamic camera where you can kind of move freely around it. Yeah, I mean, I think there were some... I mean, wasn't the original Star Fox... They're not Star Fox. Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 for Super Nintendo, didn't it? Oh, and 1, yeah. Yeah, so there was kind of that. They were, like, experimenting with it and making it work, but it really wasn't, like, the norm for the Super Nintendo or the NES. And
they had to, like, add chips to the cartridges, which was super expensive. So, like, to beef the power of the Super Nintendo up, they kind of cheated the system by adding a chip to the cartridge itself to make it okay to do 3D. Yeah. So it really wasn't, like... mainstream until the N64 and the PlayStation 1.
Yeah. Those are so that was like the big leap into, I mean, that was what I grew up in, the 64-bit era of gaming, but I still had an NES. I still had friends who had SNESs. I still remember that jump. Yep. I remember how crazy it was that, like, oh my gosh, this is a whole different way of gaming.
And I would say on the PC side, just to give you guys a bone, like Half-Life 1. And being able to, like, first-person shooter, fully 3D environments, 3D storytelling. Yeah. It matters when you don't know where the player's looking. Because you have free roam to look and discover and explore anything you want at this point. So you can't tell stories the same way anymore. Right. You don't have, like, a locked-in screen where you know where everyone's looking and what's on the screen at one time.
Yeah. So I definitely, so the biggest things that kind of changed was it revolutionized storytelling, like you talked about. And, like, again, there are whole game genres that came out as a result of this. Like, you couldn't have your ARPGs like you do now. Action RPGs, like, it would have been classified, the type of game would have been classified as, like, a platformer.
Right, it'd be like Metroid and Castlevania. A Metroidvania game. Yeah. Where there's, like, abilities that you unlock as you progress, but you don't really level up.
Right,
and
so Metroid...
areas of the game are locked away until you have this ability to get there.
Yeah, so Metroid was able to kind of transition into... I mean, I know there are other Metroid, like, recent Metroid games that are still in that platformer vein, but, like, kind of, they became... Metroid Prime became it was a first-person shooter title, and Castlevania became an ARPG style title. So like it just created genres, and just completely changed what's possible in game. That's what we have. I mean, it is our modern gaming. But again, kind of to harken back to where we are now, it's like we haven't really had a major leap since then. But I am getting ahead of myself. What was that last? What would you consider the kind of earliest leap of something that was like, oh, this is big kind of game changer?
We classified this a little bit differently, but we're not wrong. Either one of us. We just looked at it from a different angle.
Right.
So my angle was the advent of the home console, which is something you can go purchase that's mainstream, that's relatively inexpensive and affordable, that you can bring into your home and hook up to your TV, regardless of what TV you have or what sound system. Like, you go buy this Nintendo off the shelf, come home, and you have a library of games you can play with it. It's yours. You highlighted it as the jump from arcades to consoles, which is looking the exact same thing, because before it was a shared asset, the arcade, where you would go with people and like spend quarters and play this game, but you couldn't take it home, and you had to orchestrate your life around being there at that time, and like, so, and going from arcades to home consoles. So that was the last.
That was a very that was one of the earliest like major leaps. Is like, oh, now we can have this console in our home. I know the Atari kind of came before the arcades as well, so there was sort of, it's a little bit muddier, that part of history, as to what technology was available. But there was a crash, like you said, in the early 80s, and so a lot of those games kind of moved to these arcades where some dude with a beard owned your games. But now it applies as well, but at that time in the early 80s or mid 80s, when like the Nintendo
Donkey Kong
kind of rose up and like people could purchase them, like it created this sort of sense of like, oh, not only are these affordable, like, and not only is this an affordable thing that I can have and own and play anytime I want, but instead of having to spend quarters and save up quarters for it to play every single individual time of playing it, but it also gives you a sense of ownership. These are my games,
my collection. I can let my friends borrow them. I can borrow them from friends. I can sell them again.
Which is good for the developers too, because if you make an giant arcade box, like you sell it once,
here's this $5,000 machine you sell to a restaurant, and that's it. And it costs astronomical amounts to make, ship, and produce these things.
Exactly. So those are kind of the three innovations. And so again, we are in this interesting time where we haven't the last major innovation was internet connected consoles. That kind of changed
from 2004.
Everything. Yeah, and even that didn't really. That changed kind of
2002.
That kind of changed. Maybe. That changed like who you played games with, but it didn't even really change how games were played in the same way that jump from 2D to 3D. I would say that's the really. If any of those three innovations was the definitive innovation for the gaming industry, it was that first jump from 2D to 3D. The jump from SNES to N64, if you will. Like, that is, I think, kind of definitive. And since then, games have only really gotten prettier and bigger, more complicated. They haven't really, like, completely changed the way you play.
We're just, like, throwing horsepower at things and keep going. And it allows us to make smoother mechanics. Like, if you go back and play Assassin's Creed 1 and you compare it to Assassin's Creed Origins, there's like a jankiness or a clunkiness to it that's been fixed. And of course a giant graphical leap. And so that's kind of like where we're headed, or where we've been for the last 10 years. And I personally think that is a fault. I don't like that. I don't like that we've spent the last 10 to, I don't even know, 10 to 15 years in the same kind of just add more horsepower, higher frame rate, higher resolution textures. Like, okay, when are we going to make the next leap? And
I think that it's not for lack of trying, because for the last, what's the number, 10, 20, 12 years or so, like, we have seen some attempts at innovation, and the biggest one, I think, I wouldn't call it a failure, but it was definitely not what they wanted it to be. And that would be the motion control movement.
So the Nintendo with the Wii set the world on fire with their Wiimotes. And that caused Microsoft and Sony to chase them. And there was this chasing Nintendo mentality, because Nintendo was crushing financially. They were selling everything to grandmas, to babies. Everyone was Wii bowling in their living rooms. So Microsoft wanted to come up with like the Kinect, this motion sensing camera that had like visuals attached to it. You could play dancing games. It would track your arm and head movements, and it was cool. It was innovative, but it didn't catch on. It was gimmicky and clunky and buggy. Sony came out with their like PlayStation Move wands and like added gun attachments so you could like shoot the screen, kind of like light guns. But so that was taking hold in one generation. And very quickly, like the next one, the Wii U had the tablet screen, the double screen thing. That was innovative.
I would describe it as an attempt at innovative, because it didn't really change anything. It just, and in fact, it became, like motion controls, cumbersome, and so like it became an impediment in some regards to gaming and to innovation. So it's almost like, oh, we're looking forward but falling backwards. That's kind of how I feel with it, because you can't. I won't say you can't, but like unless it's intuitive, unless it makes sense, like when you're again, unless it makes sense in the same way that it makes sense that the way you play a platformer is different from the way you play a fully rendered 3D environment. Yeah, right. Like there's not really a learning curve. You don't have to go back and retrain yourself. Mm-hmm. That was a problem with motion controls. You have to go back and retrain yourself how to play a game. Mm-hmm. VR theoretically should be. That is our next thing. That next step. Coming. Yeah, that I think that when it becomes, innovative, we're probably going to have a whole conversation at some point on VR. We're promising you. Yeah. But we think VR is the next step because, it will change everything. And it will build upon what motion controls started. Because you can't really have VR without motion controls. Like that, I think those, I wouldn't completely discount motion controls as a step in the right direction. It's just it came too soon. Mm-hmm. Like you can't really have motion controls without a VR environment with which to fully realize that. But neither can you have VR without motion controls. So they do feed off of each other. And I do think that's kind of the next big step. It's got some obstacles. We're in the early infancy in the same way that the SNES was trying to, experiment with like increasing the chipset so that you can have these 3D environments and just kind of like, we're doing the same thing with VR is we're like dipping our toes in the water trying to figure out how this will work. But it's going to be such a big jump. But it's got to be affordable. It's got to be available. That's what probably the biggest hurdle right now is to get an HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift that runs. You got to have a $5,000 gaming computer. Okay, maybe $2,000. I'm being hyperbolic, and PlayStation VR. But then that stuff costs money too. Like the Oculus, so you're still dropping like $3,000. Yeah, with the controller and a fully like crazy gaming machine for a good solid VR experience. Yeah. Now the PlayStation and Sony experimented with their PlayStation VR. Yeah. But even that's $300. The PlayStation 4 Pro is $400. Yeah. So if you wanted from scratch a PlayStation VR situation, the cheapest you can get is $700. Yeah. It's great unless you get a used one, I guess. Yeah. But it's extremely expensive, and the games that are out for it don't make it worth your while unless you're on the cusp of that cutting edge technology. You have the money to burn, and you're excited to want to do it. Yeah, I have heard Skyrim VR is amazing. Yeah. But these are the people who have told me so have computers that can run it, and so they have paid for it to be worthwhile. It's still good to hear that there is a game that translates well to a game that I would be interested in. Yeah. I would be way more interested in, because part of part of my frustration with the Bethesda RPGs, both Fallout and Skyrim, is that they're just so big. Yeah. And wandering around this big world. But if it was in a virtual, if I actually felt like I was in that world wandering around, it'd totally change it. So I'd be way into. And Bethesda's the only company right now that's taking AAA full titles and making them VR. Doom VR is coming out soon, so all of Doom. Like the newest one in VR would be awesome. Like rock and roll music just thumping in your head, in your ears, and you're just like churning through. You just feel like you're there, And I was skeptical about VR, but until I tried it, and then I was like, wow, I do feel like I'm there. Yeah, it's not 100% there. It's not 100% yet. Like it's not Ready Player One. In what Ready Player One envisions. But you're still very aware of your surroundings, and you're also. There's also the sense of, like, I feel self-conscious of what I look like, especially if you're playing around other people. Yeah. But that all might change again. But that's what we mean by this is an innovation that will change everything when it gets it right. And that's the thing is, like, right now it's just in an experimental phase. We're just dipping our toes in that reality until it becomes. I'm still saying that the Oculus. And all of the headsets are still too bulky. They're still too bulky. And wires. You got to go wireless. Yeah, they have to be wireless. You cannot be looking around in a full 360. They need to be lighter, and there needs to be something that you have to do that you can do to combat the sweat. Because right now, that was the thing. When I did VR, it was very fun for about 20 minutes, and then the sweat began to pull me out of the experience. I'm just like, I already hate sweating, and so like feeling all that sweat pooling up around my eyes was just like, this is bringing me. I need to take this thing off. So like, there's a way to go. I mean, I've talked before about what I think VR should be. It shouldn't. You shouldn't have anything on your head at all. You should be able to essentially plug in and enter, your consciousness into a different world. But
now that's
we're
crazy.
super far off from that. Like, the technology that's available to us today still has a way to go, I think, though. I think there's some middle ground of, like, sure, we'll have to put something over our heads, but it needs to be something that we don't... It should be more like sunglasses.
Yep.
Like,
That's
it should be more like
yeah.
something light that just sort of, completely covers the vision, so maybe attaches to your face, but isn't like...
It breathes.
Oh, it
heavy,
breathes, absolutely. So, yeah. Or even, like, can you imagine, like, contact lenses that just, like,
that'd be sweet.
transmit? Yeah. Like, you have, like, a room that's got, like, projectors essentially that essentially transmit images through the contact lenses.
And, like, the whole... Well, Google Glass did the whole... Google Glass has started the augmented reality stuff where you could, like, set a waypoint on your GPS when you're walking down the street and it would tell you where to go and highlight the road and have a little mini-map, like Grand Theft Auto style, like, in your vision. That's amazing. Well,
think about, like... I was thinking about this, like... Just again, ways in which VR is probably going to innovate everything. It's gonna your gaming room is no longer gonna be a room with a couch and a TV and an entertainment center.
You just put on your glasses.
It's gonna be an empty room with no furniture that you just put your glasses on and spin up your console. It's gonna be somewhere mounted somewhere on the wall, and then just like have a blast in an empty room. I was even thinking it might bring back sort of this arcade mentality of like, oh yeah, no, you could easily open a business that's just a bunch of empty rooms and then just sell it for people who want to bring their VR and have a place to play their VR.
Yep.
Like, you make a killing in those, especially in those early days, until people had their own dedicated VR rooms, because that's the thing, you have to change the whole layout of your house. If you were a gamer, you'd have to convince your wife to let you dedicate an entire room to nothing but an empty space for you to VR in. They're like, try imagining that fight. So thinking about like...
No, I'm actually looking at the room we're sitting in. It's a room entirely dedicated to games.
But it's full of stuff.
Games. Yeah, but it is full of stuff.
Yeah, so you'd have to like, again, that's
There's
why
a drum set here.
That's why I'm saying, like, you can make a killing, business owners, if you just opened up, like, bought a piece of...
It's like internet cafes again.
Yeah, buy a piece of property that has some... Obviously, you need some internet and electricity, but, like, they're just empty rooms that people could bring their own VR rigs into, and... and wander around, the next World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
The VR World of Warcraft. Cool. So, yeah, I really think that VR is the next one. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what, over our own personal histories, kind of the changes you've seen, that you've experienced?
Yeah, I can do some like highlights from that blog post that I posted. It was just over the last 10 years, looking at the spring release schedule. You saw a Sony on the ropes in the last generation, where Microsoft was king and with the 360. Because they mastered online. The internet connected console, as we talked about, started with the original Xbox, moved on to 360. So that like leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. It had the best optimized hardware, the games ran the best on it, and like PlayStation was on the ropes and falling behind. And so when Sony announced the PlayStation 3, they were cocky. They set the price at $600 and said people were going to buy it anyway because we're awesome. Not the kind of marketing you want.
Nope.
And so, like, highlighting through Game Informer magazine, seeing Sony's rise to what the PS4 was when it was announced is kind of awesome. And I missed it, like I said, because I wasn't focused on Sony at the time. Now, going back to the old issues of Game Informer, I'm seeing Sony right that ship.
Yeah.
And like they made the PlayStation Network and they made the online infrastructure. They came out with a paid subscription service that offered free games before Microsoft did.
Yeah.
And where you could come up with your friends and party up very easily on Xbox 360. You couldn't do that on PlayStation, but they later added those features in. They added trophies to counteract Xbox's achievement system. So like seeing Sony's progression from being completely demolished by Microsoft to now being king, because they've sold 70 million PlayStation 4s, is insane.
Yeah.
And they're destroying Xbox One, and seeing Microsoft shoot themselves in the foot with the Xbox One announcement of being like online only, no disc drive, TV integration with DVR, and like Call of Duty only, like having all this exclusive stuff. Can't like no disc-based games. You can't sell them, you can't trade them with friends. Sony came out and said, "Oh, we'll let you play with your friends."
Like, well, they're again, they were ahead of their time. We talked about this in the pricing episode. Soon with the Gen Z people, with Gen Z kids who, when they have jobs, they grew up with iPods. That when they can, when we were kids, we bought music. We got an album, got a physical album,
whether
and
it was vinyl or cassette tape or CD. We still had to go buy physical media.
When we wanted to watch a movie that came out, we went and bought the DVD or the CD, VHS. Whew.
Some of us remember the Betamax.
Yeah. And so when we bought games, we went and bought a physical game. But the kids, Gen Z, they're they grew up with iPods.
Right.
They grew up streaming movies on Netflix. Like, their perception of all media is digital.
Yep.
So,
Audiobooks.
Yeah, exactly. So, Xbox will have their day or whatever, the gaming industry will have their day when these kids grow up and their major mode of purchasing is digital. But you're right. Us old guard, we did not let it happen with Xbox.
No, we didn't.
But, even when, you said, like, not only are you looking at, like, how Sony righted their ship, even the fact that, like, that change from Microsoft to Sony, like, even, you were an Xbox kid and now you're a PlayStation kid.
I was a PS2 and GameCube kid.
Right, yeah.
So the Xbox, the original one, was actually like my back burner. I liked the exclusives, Knights of the Old Republic and Halo and Fable. Like, that's what that was, and Forza, the original ones. And that's all I played. If I wanted any, like, third-party game, it was either PS2 or GameCube.
Yeah, so it's just kind of interesting how in some cases I wouldn't say we're slaves, but we're like, we go where it's good. Like, we're Nintendo loyalists, I would say, between the two of us. But at the end of the day, like, the war between Sony, and I think it's telling, like, because we're stuck in this weird generation of the last major innovation was internet, but also, like, 3D. Like, we're still stuck in this, okay, we've had internet consoles and 3D environments for forever now.
Yep. That
really we're just like, okay, well, whoever's doing it best right now will go where they're doing it best.
Yep.
Like, so there's no real loyalty to any developers because no one's doing anything to really innovate it.
Yep.
Aside from a few exceptions like Nintendo and but and again, one might be doing one Sony or Microsoft might be doing better than the other in any given moment, but
yeah.
And
it's interesting, like, because my mentality's changed because I was like that as a dumb gamer kid. Like, that I was just chasing what's good, and that's a lot of the market. Dumb gamer kids, you're awesome, and you're paying for games. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's just like
I would say we're still dumb gamer kids, but
when you start like getting in touch with knowing who the developers are and getting like names attached to these products that are made, like voice actors, like Troy Baker was the voice actor for Uncharted, but also Final Fantasy 13. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but well, even just like Hideo Kojima, knowing who he is and what he's made. Yeah,
and what I was talking about with Treyarch earlier. I always talk about developers and publishers. Yeah. I do it all the time on this podcast. I was not that kind of gamer. Yeah, I just wanted to play the coolest thing. Halo's coming out. I can only get on Xbox. I'm gonna go get an Xbox. Yeah. I don't know who Bungie is. I don't care. Or now I'm like, okay, I want to go back. I want to go back and play all this Insomniac. Insomniac's a PlayStation exclusive developer. Yeah. So the PlayStation 5 could suck compared to Xbox, but I'm still going to get a PlayStation 5 because I love Insomniac, because I love Naughty Dog, and they're exclusive to Sony. And so like I will follow those brands now, not just the Sony or the Microsoft one, right? Right. So as a dumb gamer kid, I just followed 360 because that was what was quote-unquote the best. I could play with my friends easiest, and it had the best graphics and the best UI and experience and internet connectivity stuff. So that has changed for me. You talk about like Gen Zers. Right. I'm still resistant to the digital media. I like discs. I love art and books and things, but my mentality's entirely switched.
Yeah. I mean, but it might switch again if Sony comes out with their next console and it's a heaping pile of garbage and they're not innovating and they're just trying to do more of the same thing and it's stupid and they mess up the UI and go back to their old PS3 ways and overprice it. You never know. Like the business could completely change at the drop of a hat.
It would take a lot to pull me away from Sony's exclusive studios now, though, because they are Guerrilla Games, and Horizon. Like, what are they going to make next? Horizon Zero Dawn 2 is coming out on a crappy PS5.
Right.
I'm gonna play Horizon. Too.
But you know what I mean, though, the ebb and flow. Even those developers can have a flop, can have a fall. It almost is inevitable in some cases.
I guess if you'd talked to me when I was playing Gears of War 3, I'd be like, of course I'm going to buy whatever dumb console Gears of War 4 comes out on. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, like I was playing Halo, and I was like, of course I'm going to buy Xbox One as Halo 5. But I did get an Xbox One for Christmas. Yes. And that was awesome. So I'm still like...
But... And my experience with your Xbox One has been nothing more than frustrating. Yeah. It's such a stupid console.
Oh, it's bad.
Oh, I can't believe it.
Fix your stuff, Microsoft.
Right, yeah, no, as I said, it's been interesting to see Microsoft turn the Xbox into just a Windows machine. Yeah. Like, that's... I feel like there's the difference between Windows 10 and Xbox One is minimal.
Well, they've announced that they've created the platform for both to exist on.
Right. And, like, again, we'll talk at some point about, like, the idea of cross-platform gaming, and I'm interested. I think that cross-platform...
Sony still doesn't play nice with that, by the way.
I know, that's fine, because they're on top, but I like the idea of, like, I think cross-platforming would be a good future for gaming. However, the way Microsoft does it, is a bittersweet, I'll say.
Yeah.
In some regards, I'm like, oh, that's really cool that you can play Sea of Thieves on your PC with people who are playing it on Xbox.
Yeah.
But the way it's translated into the Xbox One's operating system is, it's the most frustrating operating system.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather just put up with Windows 10, like, just on my PC, because I'm going to do it anyways for my PC. So, crazy. Cool. Well, I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
So cool. All right, that is our topic for the day. Tell us what you guys think. Tell us what you guys think were the kind of big innovations for gaming, either for you personally that made you either more interested, changed the way games were for you, or tell us if you think gaming hasn't changed at all and you think it's still the same old things as it always was, and if we're just spouting out a bunch of bullcrap.
One of the coolest tidbits of feedback I'd love to hear is from non-gamers who listen to us, who started playing smartphone games. Tell me about your iPhone 3, and playing like Candy Crush or Farmville or whatever it was on Facebook. Like, those things changed gaming forever in the sense of like getting non-gamers to play.
Yeah,
so that's very innovative, and I'd love to hear if you play any video game at all on your phone. That counts.
Yeah, we do tend to brush over mobile gaming in our podcast because it's not something that neither you or I do a lot of on phones.
Right.
We mobile game on our Switches or on the DS, which is still more of a mainstream form of gaming. But there's a huge market out there for mobile games, and people play them. So we'd love to hear the thoughts of people who do. Yeah. So. Great, you guys know where to find us. Tell them where the good people can find us who don't know.
We are 80-Bit Podsmash on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit. We had just 80-Bit Podsmash, no hyphens, no uppercases or any fancy things. Dan, Penguin Man, Dan is good at making Reddit posts with every episode. So go to our subreddit and you can engage us there. You can find us on Twitter. You can tweet at us, and on Instagram at 80-Bit Podsmash.
Yeah, we try to regularly post throughout the week Instagram content.
I am brewing a post right now. I will have it tonight.
Brewing.
But because of when this launches and when it records, when you guys hear it, it will have already been going. Like, you'll have already seen it on Instagram.
Sweet. All right. Well, that's all, folks.
Have a good week. Come back next time.
Bye.